Alright, welcome back. In the last module, we got started with Azure Devops pipeline. We configured our first pipeline using the GUI, and GUI is not only the way, however, if you're getting started with Azure DevOps and you want to learn that what is continuous integration and delivery, how you could configure, GUI is probably a good option. It's not recommended as always because you've got your YAML as well. That's what we're going to learn today. Um, Azure also recommends you to use YAML because if there are any new features, first it's going to be rolled out for YAML, and then it's going to be rolled out for GUI or classic way of configuring CI/CD. So how did we configure the CI? We created our first CI, which gonna picks up your code from the repo, be it Azure DevOps. In our case, it was could be GitHub or Bitbucket or any form of Git. And then we learned how you could configure, hook it up with your repo, and then how you could use the by default task available. We did it for Terraform, however, don't worry, it should be pretty similar to for any other application. Just start picking up. Just first thing first is like you got to know what you want to do with your continuous integration. What are the libraries? What are the dependencies you want to build? Once you built it, time to release it. Now, the release in Azure DevOps is a place where you wanna deploy your code. You built your code over here. You created an artifact, and then now you wanna deploy onto some sort of environment, be it dev, non-prod, or prod. And that's what we did. We picked up the code from our pipeline. For our continuous integration pipeline, we picked up the latest code, then ran a bash script, and then did init plan and apply onto our environment. We primarily use the out-of-box task which Azure gives you. This is especially beneficial when you're just getting started and very new to DevOps world, or you want to understand what's the continuous integration and delivery, and this is probably the easiest way you could do it. However, YAML is the way forward to go because majority of the configuration manager or whatever configuration you want to write, it's basically or majorly it's written in YAML. For example, you take an example of Kubernetes. All of your manifests are written in YAML, so you got to be a little okay writing YAML configuration. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna get started with the YAML configuration now. What we're gonna do is we're gonna convert this particular integration, continuous integration pipeline into a YAML. It's gonna be pretty simple. First, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just remove the repository from here because I don't want it. There are two pipelines for each repo. And interesting thing, if you go to any of these tasks, you could see YAML as well, and then you could start picking up the snippet and put that into your pipeline as well. I'm going to save this so that now it's not going to be auto triggered. So let's get started and start writing our first YAML configuration for the repo. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reciprocate or create a replica of whatever we have done using the GUI for continuous integration. The first part would be continuous integration, nothing else. So let's get started. First thing first, let's create the Azure DevOps pipeline file. You give it a name as Azure pipelines.yaml. All right. Looks okay, and then you get started writing it. You first thing is you create a variable, you put in variable, and then you start defining your variable. If you have your own variable, good. Otherwise, you could use Azure DevOps system variable, which is going to be system dot debug. I want to enable system debugging, so that's why I've used this variable. And now the trigger is the block wherein you define that okay, whenever I push to master branch, please initiate the pipeline and perform whatever steps I have written inside the pipeline. How many types of triggers are there? There are four types of trigger: pull, push, schedule, pipeline. What we're going to do is we're going to use a push trigger, and you start doing by using the trigger keyword, and then the batch is gonna be true, and post that you type in, okay, do it for the branches. uh, and which branch do you want include? You want to include master, which means anything pushed onto the master branch by anybody initiate the continuous integration pipeline. Do you want to exclude something? Probably you want to exclude feature branches. So anybody pushes anything to the feature branches, just don't let the pipeline trigger, because feature branch are probably not the actual branch which gets deployed. People use it for the development purpose. So that's how you could use the triggers. There's also some of the cool features like schedules. So let's suppose you want your pipeline to be automatically trigger every 4 hours or 5 hours every week or every day. What you could do is you could simply use a cron, and I'm going to use a random cron as I remember. So this is gonna, after probably every 5 hours or after some interval, this is gonna initiate the pipeline automatically without any intervention. I want to include it for the branch master, and yeah, that's about it. I'm gonna use always equals to true, and then the display name, which is going to be daily cron. Alright, we're good. Now the important part comes up as the pool. Remember, we use the agent pools, Mac OS, Ubuntu, or Windows, where you want this pipeline to be triggered, to be run on. We want it to be triggered on some sort of machine, right? That's gonna be your pool. So I'm gonna use the pool and then give it a name. In fact, pool should be coming just before the schedule. Yep, now it is not throwing any error. I'm gonna identize it. Yep, looks okay. Hit enter. VM image. I want to run it on a Ubuntu machine, which is gonna be the latest Ubuntu, and that's all. We're good. So we're good with the pool. Now what we should get started with is the pipeline, actual pipeline code which we're going to start writing. How do you get started with? So the hierarchy which is defined into Azure DevOps is, you get started with, you have your pipeline, this is your pipeline, and then underneath it you should have a stage define that, okay, you have dev, non-prod and prod stage, and underneath each stage you should have some sort of job, which is nothing but the script or packages which perform some sort of task for you. And then underneath the job you have the step. You could have multiple jobs, you could have multiple stages, you could have multiple steps as well. Alright, let's start writing the stages. Our first stage gonna be stages, and underneath the stages I gonna have a single stage which is going to be build tf code. Looks okay. And then I'm gonna put a display name as well. Display name is gonna be same. Probably copy it and paste it. And then I'm gonna give a job. And underneath the jobs you could have a job, just like the stages you have a underneath a plural you could have a singular, which is underneath the stages is gonna be stage, and same jobs and then job. It's gonna be a build task for us. And then the display name going to be, probably I'm gonna give it a same display name. Probably don't want to put much energy over here. And then we have the steps. Remember, underneath the job we should have a step, and the step should be, okay, check out the branch, check out the repo, and then if you want to persist the credential, these are some of the optional. However, when you're getting started with the pipeline, probably it is best to follow just the documentation. Now what we want to do is we want to use the publish pipeline artifact. So what we're going to do is we're going to start using the tasks. So underneath the steps you could have multiple tasks, and then you should have multiple tasks. So you see that you've got task over here, you've got PowerShell task, you've got PowerShell on machine task, you've got publishing, Docker, you've got a Docker task. So all sort of tasks you have got just if you enter command or control enter. So what I want is a publish pipeline artifact. This is going to publish my artifact. I'm gonna give it a display name, which is gonna be publish Terraform code. This is gonna have an input's going to have a path. Now path is gonna have the by default variable we have, which is system dot default working directory. That's the by default variable which Azure DevOps gives us, and then the artifact name of the artifact which we want to give is Terraform build artif. Looks okay. We have first stage done. Let's create one more stage. Generally in the real life scenario you would have multiple stages. Now this is just an example. You could have just create your own stage and uh, uh, run code basis on that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna write another stage, and I'm gonna make sure that I have got it identified properly, stage, and then underneath the stage what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna download the artifact. I'm gonna give it a stage name, and then I'm gonna give it a display name as well. Display name is download Terraform artifacts. Yeah, short form should be okay. And then the same, you've got your jobs. Underneath the jobs you've got a job. The job's gonna be again build, and define a job name. It's gonna be download code, and then the steps. And underneath the steps we would have some task. Did we have the same task over here? Yeah, we have the publish artifact as well. If you see the view YAML, you should see that okay, this was the task which we used as well, and then the publish path. And so you could, if you want, you could just copy it from here as well and paste it right over here, publish artifact. Alright, so I'm just gonna type download and hit control enter, and that's gonna give me all sort of tasks available. I'm gonna choose the download pipeline artifact, download pipeline artifact, and the latest version, which is at the rate 2. Hit enter, and then gonna use the input, which is going to be your artifact name. Artifact name is the Terraform build artif. Give it that name, and then build version to download, which is going to be latest, and then the download path, which is going to be obviously system. I wish it could give me auto completion. It didn't, so I'm going to copy this and paste it right over here. So we've got two stages. The first one is the build TF code, and the second one is the download Terraform code. Kind of looks okay. Let's probably push this and see if we have any issues. Git add, git commit, and the message, my first YAML pipeline looks okay, git push. Alright, we've pushed the code. Let's go back to our pipeline and see if we have anything. The first time you do it, you got to create it manually. So you go to the new pipeline and then you select the Azure DevOps pipeline, and then um, just use the run button over here, and it's gonna start building all the stages. You've got two stages: build TF code and then the download Terraform. Now if you start seeing the logs, you're gonna have logs per environments. Building the code, I'm gonna check out the repo for you, publish the Terraform code, and then the download's gonna be, so you've got your artifact created just like we had in previous session. We have got all of our code right over here packaged in the form of an artifact, and then the download code gonna download the artifact onto your working directory, which is system.default. Now if you start pushing it, pushing any code from your pipeline or repo locally, it's gonna automatically build the continuous integration pipeline for you. All right, that was about it. This was about how you could get started with writing your first Azure DevOps YAML pipeline. There's going to be more advanced level stuff coming up, so stay tuned.